So I have been like watching your content and waiting to like reach out and have you on in person for probably like 3 years now, maybe
Damn.
like 2.5. I know. So I was at one of the Fit for Service retreats like back in the day. I think it was probably maybe 2.5 years ago or something like that. And I had to leave early because one of my littles needed something or a nanny fell through. And I left the day before I think you were doing some kind of like
Process.
process. And I was like, damn it, this is gonna be my chance to actually meet him. But it all ended up working out because your content like kept coming up on my feed, and I really dove deep into a lot of polarity work recently, and I'm like, I wish I had this earlier, because to me, like, there's so much truth to a lot of the messages out there. But long-winded way of saying, like, thank you so much for being here, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So, where do we start? Because I want to get it into polarity dynamics. I want to get into enmeshment, because that has been recently coming up a lot on my algorithm and like some book suggestions, and I think that topic is really fascinating. And then just like relationship dynamics in general, like the success failure rate and how people are kind of opting out. Maybe start with polarity and like what your opinion is on it, like the amount that it affects the success or failure of a relationship, or is it kind of one of those trendy things that is popping up and everyone just wants to talk about?
I think both.
Both.
Yeah, I think both. I think it depends on what the come from is. I think like anything in life that is important and matters to us, the come from is really important. So what I mean by that is, like, you know, you can get into, say, pseudo-polarity, and the focus is on pure attraction and nothing else. But the reality is that we're multi-leveled, multifaceted beings, right? And so attraction is one component of intimacy and connection and relationship. Other parts, like, you know, you can look at, like, put a business hat on for a second, like client attraction, well, client retention. And there's different strategies, unconscious and conscious, and there's different ways that we need to be with ourselves and with others in the dynamic to maintain connection, right? And polarity can be like that. It's really important for us to maintain polarity or connection in relationship in order for the relationship to continue to grow and flourish. The reality also is that we change as people. Like, when we first meet, we're not who we were 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Just the meeting of two people coming together, right, and being attracted to each other and being connected to each other. So polarity is not just, in my mind, in my perspective, I guess, polarity is attraction, but it's also connection. It's also desire as well. Like, it's a yearning for each other, and it's also a fit. Right, and it's not just sexual.
Right.
For me, like, again, polarity is very robust. Like, it's, yes, sexuality is a big part of it, absolutely. But the way that we communicate, the way that we argue, right, the way that we do conflict, like, is there polarity in the way that we do conflict as well? I can give some examples of that as well. And polarity for me is also a dance between leading and being led. And the feminine is not the only one that's always being led, right? And so, for me, it requires such deep attention to self, how we're showing up, the thoughts that we're having, the beliefs that we hold, how we project that into our relationship, and then how we choose to communicate that as well, and how we both choose to grow outside of maybe the pain that occurs when we're out of polarity or out of sync, because that can happen. Right? Like, life happens, we get distracted, we get frustrated, something happens, maybe we lose our job, and it's really important to us, and now we're hyper focused on that, and our stress levels are really high, and we're out of sync with the people in our lives that really matter to us. So we're somewhat out of polarity, but we're almost out of sync with life as well, which is obviously going to have an effect on our partners. And so maybe they then interpret that as, oh, he doesn't want me, or she doesn't want me, or they don't like me anymore. And then they start to shut down and close off their hearts. And now there's more disconnection as opposed to connection. And so we have to develop ways of being that help us come back into polarity when the time is right, when we fall out of it, because that's the dance, right?
So why do you think it is that, so David Data talks about we have a core polarity, right? So like a core
masculine,
charge,
a core
right?
feminine,
Exactly.
yeah.
But life will happen, trauma will happen, and it's a protective mechanism, so you'll kind of develop these shells. So you'll have someone like me is a really great example. I took that test. I'm in the 99th percentile for feminine. However, I developed an extreme masculine shell, and I was wearing that for a really long time, and it took so much effort and surrender and discomfort to kind of shed those layers and be in a more soft, vulnerable state, because to me that was like unsafe. I couldn't do that. So I guess how do you address if you're like out of polarity as an individual and then within relationship?
Yeah, deal with your trauma. Yeah, deal with your trauma that's unprocessed and not addressed, so that you can be closer to your core truth. And part of your core truth is going to be living from an energetic space that is more aligned with who you truly are. And so how do we deal with our trauma? We have to face it. We have to go into it, right? And there are many modalities that we can use. So there's inner child work, there's somatic work, there's trauma release exercises, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, et cetera, right? There's so many different modalities we can use, but it's less about the modalities and more about the intention of actually addressing the stuff that caused us to wear a mask. For example, and Tony Robbins speaks a lot to this as well, right? We will wear masks as we grow up and we grow through the world to protect our vulnerabilities and sensitivities. And in the realm of polarity, if we just use about masculine and feminine, we'll lay a different masculine feminine mask. So for example, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. You said you're at your core, you're very strong in your feminine. Mm-hmm. However, you wore a masculine mask to protect that, right? Mm-hmm. Have you identified why and where that started?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I was like parentified as a child very early on, firstborn, really abusive upbringing from both ends, a lot of like mental health issues within, my family dynamic. And I, like, anytime I had a need, not only was it not met, I felt like I was wrong for having that need, right? So I had to be hyper independent, hyper vigilant for safety, like always clocking everyone's emotional state in the room so I know how to show up. So taking care of my younger siblings from a very young age. And that put me in like a very, like I had to kind of compartmentalize, right? Because I can't feel this thing because I've got stuff to do.
Which is a very masculine energetic.
For sure,
right? And giving, looking after your siblings, and is a very masculine energetic. So you're shutting off your ability to receive, which is a feminine energetic. So it's no surprise that you wore a masculine mask. But then what happens is as you grow up, right, and you can verify this or not, you start to grow into your womanhood. My guess is, I mean, well, maybe not, you'll correct me if I'm inaccurate here, but there was probably conflict with your mother, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so you weren't probably, at least unconsciously, weren't really allowed to be in your feminine because you overbearing mother. Were you parentified more from your father or from your mother? More enmeshed with your mother or your father?
My mom, because my dad, he ended up leaving when I was 5. So that was, my primary parent was definitely my mom.
So there's another thing, like if you're the eldest already looking after your children, already looking after your siblings, or having to take that on, now you're taking on another masculine role. So there's another masculine mask. But then as you get older and you step into your womanhood, there's a part of you that wants to be in your feminine. There's a part of you that's attracted to men. There's a part of you that's attracted to the masculine. So now you have to put on not so much a feminine mask, but it is because you've already got masks on. So now the only thing that can happen is wear more masks. So now you're in your feminine. So now you're wearing a feminine mask over that. But then maybe you have experiences that aren't safe in your feminine, either at home still with your mum, where she's just by her behavior and her mental health and the way she's being and her unhealthy dynamics that she's projecting onto you, you still can't be in your feminine. So there goes another masculine mask that has to come on. But then when you go out into the world, you're realizing that the men that you're maybe wanting or desiring don't necessarily want a masculine energetic. So now you put another feminine mask on. But it's all compounded upon all these masks that aren't really you. And that's the truth part that I'm talking about. That's the let's deal with our unprocessed trauma. Let's feel what has been unfelt. Let's face what we haven't been able to face, so that we can actually be in the truth of who we are. But we don't even know the fuck we are. That's part of the problem. And the closer we get to that, the more judgment we have, because most of us have grown up with so much judgment around us, being judged, being criticized, and it's all we know. So we judge ourselves. And then whenever we judge, we create distance. So now we're still getting further away from our truth. So part of, I don't want to say the solution, but part of the journey for us is not only to deal with our unprocessed trauma, but one of the ways that we do that outside of modalities, right, is we need to be witnessed in healthy, loving, compassionate, non-judgmental spaces by other people in our truth. Compassionate, non-judgmental witnessing. Mm-hmm. That there over time helps soften us, helps bring us into our truth, into our hearts, and into ultimately the life that we really want to live. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to be seen in our truth because especially, I'm not going to say everyone, but most of us don't, like yourself, I can share a similar experience. We don't feel safe and comfortable being in our truth emotionally, growing up as children. Mm-hmm. As adults, it's a different story. But even as adults, we pretend, we think, we've got it. We think we feel safe. We think we're all good, but we're not. We're still wearing masks most of the time.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And then it's hard because you could do all of this personal development work. You could do a whole bunch of psychedelics. You can come to the conclusion of where your traumas began and try to live more consciously instead of going into like your subconscious patterns, right? Like I'm going to seek out my dad, right? Because he left at 5. Well, that's not a good idea usually. So most of the time, not a good idea. So just have conscious awareness over patterns and kind of disrupt them, creating more space between the action and the thought.
That's part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's part of it. But it's really a practice of consistently facing ourselves on a daily basis, on a moment to moment, like really being in our truth on a moment to moment basis.
So how do you know when you're exercising from a place of truth versus subconscious pattern? Because you don't, right? Like that's the whole point. It's subconscious. Vitality, it's in the shadow. Energy.
So let me give you an example. I love playing the victim, right? So I'm going to sit with that for a moment. Or I love being in misery. I'm addicted to misery. I'm going to sit with that for a moment. And this is the thing, right? Like we're so disconnected from our bodies. So I need to feel the energy and the truth. Is there truth in that? Yeah, there is. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. I prefer to blame other people for the challenges I have in my life than actually take responsibility for it, because it's easier to blame other people than really look at myself. Mm-hmm. Like there's truth to that. I can feel the energy in that, right? But you've got to be more connected to your body. This is where somatics is really, as a modality or a practice, somatics is very, very important, because again, like so many of us are disconnected from our bodies because we're so fast. We live in such a fast-paced world, right? Like everything's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. It's dopamine loaded. It's like it's anticipatory. Well, let me get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's all goals. And I love goals, right? Mm-hmm. I love creating. I love building. But we very seldom just slow down. And when we slow down, one of the core reasons why we don't slow down to be in deeper contact with our bodies, to then really connect to the vitality and the energy. Like the physiological energy that you'll feel mainly through here, right? Like through this area, through here, is because confronting our truth is very uncomfortable. Imagine the majority of people own some of those patterns that you just spoke to, like, oh, I prefer to be angry at people and hurt people than really listen to them. Mm-hmm. I know a stack of people like that, but they'll never admit it. Because who wants to admit that?
Right.
Who wants to admit that, I'm addicted to my suffering? No, that's not true. Consciously, it's not true, but it keeps happening, so that there is a truth to it, and there's a payoff. There's a payoff to everything we experience. And if the experience is repetitive, there's a payoff that lives underneath it, a truth that lives underneath there 100%. That we're not addressing.
Yeah, to me, running away from that never made sense, because it's so empowering once you realize that you are making that choice, because then you can choose to do something else. So instead of saying, everyone's always wronging me, poor me, right? Like a lot of the victim trap, it's like, oh no, what am I getting from this? Because I totally agree. There is something that you're getting, whether it's attention, like sympathy,
secondary benefit, third benefit.
Exactly. So like find that. I think that's probably important. It's showing up other places, but now I can choose to do something else. And how wonderful is that? I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to feel this way. There is another option. And I think sometimes it's maybe seeing other people live in a different way that can be inspiring. Like, oh, there is another choice. Breakups are a really good example of that. Like I've seen like really healthy breakups, really healthy uncoupling from people that have kids, and you too often see like tumultuous endings and people that like make the other person a villain all of the time. And it's like there's another choice, and sometimes there's not, right? Because you are dealing with someone else that has free will, but I don't know, I think some part of it is being inspired by other people that are a little bit further down the path than you.
Yeah, and we're relational beings. I think the more we look to people that are living a life that we desire and that we value, that aligns with us, and the more we surround ourselves with that, the more feedback we're getting from that kind of energetic, right? That kind of relational practice that, you know, whether it's saying, hey, I want to surround myself with a healthy couple because I really value relationship. Or I want to surround myself with people that are doing exceptional at business because I want to be a better business person. I want to learn how to create from a more integral place. I'm going to surround myself with people that are smarter than me or wiser than me or that are ahead of me in that space. I mean, learning and growing through osmosis very much matters. You know, there's what's that old saying? You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. There's a lot of truth to that. Just the exposure of it, the simple exposure of it, and the way the areas of our brain light up with what's familiar and then what we do with that information. If we surround ourselves with pain and suffering, we're more than likely going to get a lot of that in our lives.
So it's come up a couple times in conversation, the importance of having someone to like kind of witness, having that tribe, and again, like who you're surrounding yourself with. What I see a lot in the male space, and you can obviously speak to this more than me as a man, but it's the lack of good men holding bad men accountable. And like one example the other day, one of my girlfriends was, she's in like this bad relationship, and the guy kind of like whacked her in front of a group of people, and it was like in someone's house, and her guy friend was there, and he like kind of went to intervene and correct that behavior, and she got in the way, and she's like, no, it's really not a big deal, it was just a whack, like it's not. And this guy's like, you know, so and so, that's
what an
not
interesting trauma bond.
That's not okay. You can't, like, men can't do that. And she was like, no, it's fine. And I was like, you can't, what you just did is you interrupted a really important process, which was like a good man holding a bad man or a bad behavior accountable. And like, you're a woman, you're going to be more like emotional and sensitive. You don't want anyone to get hurt, but like him getting hurt was actually the right thing, in my opinion, in that moment. Like, you don't get to put hands on a woman like that. You can, especially publicly, if you're doing that in front of people, like what are you doing behind closed doors? And what you did is potentially interrupt his ability to grow and learn from that behavior, right? Or you'll see men that are not showing up as husbands or not showing up as fathers, and they're going out with these guys and getting drunk or gambling or like cheating, and it's their male group sees this and they're not okay with it. Like, somebody like, oh man, I can't believe he's, you know, cheating again, or whatever the behavior is, but they don't say anything. They think it's not my place, I don't want to cause conflict. And so, well, what's the purpose of that group though? It should be holding each other responsible and accountable and making you strive and grow. But I see that a lot, and I wonder what has kind of happened, because I think traditionally that has been like the masculine role, right? Is you had to show up, like a handshake meant something, your word meant something.
Not much anymore.
No,
in
not
certain
anymore.
circles at least.
Yeah, so like where do you think that masculine accountability has gone?
Men are too isolated, generally speaking. Like, just because people hang out and there's groups of people, they're not real with each other. They're not. The reality is, in the world that we live in, this Western construct, unless you're in a some kind of deliberate, intentional men's group, it doesn't mean that you have the title of a men's group. That's part of it, sure, but like, you're deliberately, intentionally spending time with men on a regular basis that are challenging you, that are holding you accountable for your behavior, for your actions, for your thoughts, for your beliefs, for the things that you think and want to do, all of that, that support you at the same time as well, but that are going to call you forward, right? And that can, again, hold you with compassion and empathy and non-judgment, and tell you when you're fucking up and be very direct and clear with you. Unless you have an intentional group like that, you're not accountable to anyone, and you're alone and you're isolated. Because you're not being yourself. You can't show yourself. You're wearing masks. Men are going to wear as many masks as possible to fit in, as many as possible. So we need to go back to intentionally and deliberately spending time, men, I'm talking about, spending time with other men where we allow ourselves to be really seen, even if it's in our shadows, the ugliest parts of ourselves. And it's not just about, men get together every week and sit in a circle and fucking cry. Like it's not about that.
Yeah.
If tears, because sadness is there, are true, then great. But it's more about how close can I get to the truth, and how can I allow this man to be a mirror for me in my life, so that my truth can be present. And you've again, it's exposure. You've got to practice that. It takes time to, and there's layers and levels of truth, right? But it takes time to begin to really be honest and real with where you are in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think men probably need those designated spaces more, because women just naturally kind of curate those. One of the videos I saw you post recently was a reel, and it was on, what was his name? From the Fresh and Fit, Myron Gaines was talking about vulnerability in men, and it is a conversation that I've had so many times, and I get so frustrated because the immediate response from the like that manosphere group is all vulnerability is weakness. Definitely don't cry in front of your woman ever. And it's almost using it's really similar to the polarity conversations, but it's an excuse to kind of go back to 1950s traditional dynamics where the woman is subordinate and kind of like has no autonomy or agency, essentially. Like you just follow and listen, essentially. And to me, I'm like, what kind of relationship can be built if you can't be vulnerable at all? But there is a balance, right? You don't want to be completely unwinding in front of your woman, because then she's gonna be like, oh, he doesn't have it, I have to have it. And then that can
also interrupt polarity too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, where is the from your opinion, like what does vulnerability look like, healthy vulnerability within a romantic relationship? And then how can you use something like a men's group to kind of have like space for the rest? Yeah,
so I think that's a great question. So for me personally, again, like it comes down to personal values and accountability with self, and we have to be deliberate. We have to allocate time and space to thinking about the way we want to be in relationship. Most people just run on unconscious patterns. Mm-hmm. They just go through life. What's the next thing? They're in survival. Like most of us are just in a low grade or mid grade sympathetic arousal where we're literally in survival mode. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. So we have to get out of that by many different ways, but one of them is being more deliberate. So for me personally, if I'm going through a challenge, I want to check in with this first. This is me. I want to check in here. I want to slow down. I want to be in some stillness. I want to contemplate, and I want to feel what's happening within me. This challenge that I'm feeling, where's it really coming from? What's the source of it? What's it evoking me? Where am I feeling it in my body? What is happening in my life right now that is feeding this? What am I noticing about myself? Am I noticing that my behavior is more abrupt or aggressive? Like, how is that impacting? I want to check in with myself in all the different ways I can. If I'm struggling in any capacity, whether it's I need a solution, I can't find it, or I'm struggling just to be with the thing that I'm with and I feel volatility or uncertainty within me, I'm going to go take that to my men's group. I'm going to call it a men's group because it's just simple language. I'm going to take that to my men, to the men in my life that hold me in the ways that I shared earlier. Mm. After I've had mirroring and reflection and I've gone through a journey with them on that thing, I then may need to or may not need to bring that to my wife. I may not need to. But I'm not just going to go to her and vomit and expect her to fix me or find a solution for me. Mm-hmm. Now, there are times where the counter conversation that is, well, you're wearing a mask. You're not being raw and real with her. Yeah, there's some truth to that, right? So there are times where you will just in the moment be raw and real. But it's very important to have some level of self-control. Yes. Because the self-control lends itself, it lays a foundation for the capacity to have an increased self-worth, right? And then you're able to make decisions more acutely. You're able to make decisions more truthfully. So when you say, well, how do you know? You've got to know yourself more. and when you know yourself more, and when you also have agreements in relationship with the other person about how you bring shit and stuff to each other, that really matters as well. So for example, let's say I need to be very real with something that I'm experiencing, and I'm very clear on that. I'm not just not going to go to my woman and say, I'm not going to go to my wife and say, there, here's all my shit. That's going to, firstly, from a polarity perspective, I'm less interested in polarity that time, but if it happens, if it compounds consistently over time, that becomes now I'm concerned with polarity.
Yes.
Once off here and there is fine, like it's sort of okay. It's not a big deal, but still, like, you want to have not only self-control, but self-awareness around that. I'm going to go to her and I'm going to say, hey, I need to connect with you on some stuff. I need to speak to you about some things. I need to know when's a good time for you. And I'm going to give her some context about it, just a little bit of context, so she can get a feel for what she can be in her feminine and feel what she needs. And then I'm going to tell her what I need. I'm either going to say to her, here's a framework, it's a simple framework, right? I need to be heard. I need to be hugged, or I need a solution, right? As an example, right? Mm-hmm. And you can have that agreement in your relationship, right? Like, I just need you to hear me and don't do anything else. Just hear what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. So she has context on that. Or actually, I need you to hear me and I just need a hug. Or I actually need your opinion, your perspective on something. Like, and that's not necessarily fix it for me or give me a solution, but I just need your perspective. What are you seeing that I can't see, right? But again, you have to have these established agreements in relationship. But for me, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. My first port of call is me. Mm-hmm. My second port of call is the men in my life. My third port of call is going to be my wife. So that way, when I'm coming to her, I can still be very vulnerable and real, but I'm not coming to her loose. I'm not coming to her with such levels of uncertainty that could potentially impact the way she feels in her nervous system. Now, sometimes you're going to have, like I said, moments where they're sort of unpredictable and it just happens spontaneously. Mm-hmm. Spontaneity actually is part of polarity, but this spontaneity isn't necessarily always welcomed. But again, self-control, self-awareness, knowing each other, knowing self, knowing when to be more of self in that moment, and knowing when to say, hey, I'm going through some big stuff and I don't want to necessarily bring it to you right now. I need to be with this for a bit. Like, go back and go to another room or go for a walk, go regulate yourself. Like, that's not being fake or wearing a mask. That's you taking responsibility and accountability for the shit you're feeling. It's not her problem. It's not her fault. Mm-hmm. None of it is. Like, it's all, everything, and I use absolute terms here, everything is within us. Whatever I'm experiencing right now is my experience. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm here and I'm comfortable, it's not that you're comfortable. You may be comfortable, but I'm comfortable, right? It's not, if my wife is behaving a particular way and I don't like it, that's not to say I can't ask her to be different and make requests, state my needs, give her information, give her feedback. But if I'm angry, the anger's fucking mine. Mm-hmm. That's me getting angry. I've got to own that. Why not? Why? If I don't own it, then I'm disempowering myself. You touched on this earlier, because now I'm giving her the power. And it's totally unrealistic, because it's not their responsibility to do anything for us at all. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying we don't share in relationship. That's totally not what I'm saying. She can't be responsible for my feelings.
Right. Because
that's a lose-lose game. Mm-hmm. She can't be. Like, it's a physical impossibility. And she's not meant to be.
Yeah, and I see a lot of either resentment when it comes to that level of responsibility that men have.
Rigid expectations that aren't based in truth. That's where the resentment comes in, because I'm unwilling to own my. I'm just use me as an example. Yeah. Like, I'm willing to own my shit. I'm unwilling to own my empowerment, actually, and ultimately, like, keep digging deep. I'm unwilling to own my self-worth. That allows me to not be so dictated to by how someone else has been. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I heard something, I was listening to something the other day, and everything is an offer. Like, my wife getting not upset at me, or just upset at me, whatever. Like, it's an offer. Like, I'm invited to either get caught into that whirlpool, or I'm invited to get curious about it, ask questions, maybe take ownership of something, a behavior or whatever. But it's an offer. Like, I don't have to react to that. If I do, I'm choosing at some level to react to that. I'm being dictated to by my unconscious impulses that I'm choosing to not make more conscious, and therefore have not control, but have greater awareness, and then choose more empowerment, embodiment, essentially.
I think you nailed that, because what I've seen is we've gone from a place of just kind of like numbing ourselves, shutting down, like our parents or grandparents.
So
right?
much.
We are this role and function, and we can't express anything to our partner. Like love, the idea of love within a relationship is really new, right? The idea of being in a relationship like a marriage and raising children for more than a decade, where both partners stay alive and don't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or die in war. Like that's also very new.
Very new.
So the overcorrection to the numbing was this kind of like one of my friends calls it emotional incontinence, right? It's just like this unloading.
Exactly. It's actually interesting. I call it that as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's a perfect way to describe it, because it's like, well, this is my truth, and I'm just gonna, without any regard, dump it onto you.
Well.
Yeah, and that's not healthy, because you do have to have a little bit or more discipline to be able to say
respect and honor for self and for others.
Yes,
yeah. And by the way, I'm super guilty of this as well. Like,
everyone.
Like I have not mastered this. I'm not going to say, I've mastered this. Do I have moments of mastery? 100%. But I am definitely working on becoming more consistent. And part of that is because there's layers, like I said earlier, around that unhealed trauma, right? Mm-hmm. There'll be times where that little boy that lives within my body and my psyche and my nervous system, that reflects through my nervous system, will come out and say, I ain't having that anymore. Like, I was beaten, I was this, I was whatever when I was younger. I'm not going to have you talk to me like that because it reminds me of something else. Like, that's the unconscious sort of narrative, right? Mm. So then me as a sort of, I'm not a big adult, but I'm a strong adult now in the world compared to that my 5-year-old boy. I'm going to come in and be reactive and protective and defensive. And so that may come out in the sense that I don't want to hear my wife, or I'm going to have a stern look on my face, or I'm not going to really listen to her and get curious, but rather I'm just going to be defensive and push back. Mm-hmm. Like, when that happens, what's often happening there is our nervous systems are time traveling, and we're living from that wounded little kid. That's
so interesting. I like how you phrase that.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and it fucking sucks for all of us. And then, back to the polarity conversation, there's another diffusion of polarity in those moments. Because now we're not actually mature, relational, sexual adults. We're little kids doing this. Mm. Like, there's no polarity when little kids are doing this.
So when you see no, not at all. When you see couples kind of go into more of like that 50-50 dynamic, and it's almost this fierce independence that a lot of people have, that I'm not going to lose myself, you're not going to lose yourself. And
often from an unprocessed wound around that, so there's like sovereignty being taken away from us.
There's like no place where there's actually a relationship. It's kind of more like two partners going through life and choosing to have kids or whatever. Like,
define, it's a great question. It's an interesting one. Define, it's not two people having a relationship. I guess what I would ask, what do you mean by relationship? Because there's definitely a relationship of sorts there.
Sure. Yeah, more, I should say more romantic, like a romantic partnership, romantic relationship. Partnership can be maybe not the perfect word.
There could be romance in the relationship. I mean, there still can be defined romance.
I guess where like there is it's hard to articulate, but you know it when you feel it. Like the relationship that makes you and your wife completely different than every other relationship that you have, right? Like the one that you have with your person. So it's not entirely sexual, because there's going to be a time or a season where that goes away, right? Like you have a baby, or you old age, sickness, whatever.
Oscillates, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's not necessarily sexual, but it is like, it's a deeper, more...
and you're saying the 50-50 dynamic disrupts that?
I think so. When you get two people that are so focused on career or don't want to necessarily help the other person through a difficult time. So let's say it's... I
agree on that.
We'll say postpartum or something like that. Mom's going through it, and dad is like, your feelings are not mine to change, and like you need to work on yourself, and then the relationship will naturally heal itself. And to me, I think that's bypassing, like, so obviously, like, you know, you're not responsible for her feelings. You definitely can influence them, especially as like the leader of the family or the leader of the relationship. And there is something to being invested into the relationship specifically, not just like your personal development. I think if you focus on
otherwise why be in a relationship,
right? Like, no yes, you can work on yourself.
I don't buy into that. So when I speak to the, taking accountability, self-responsibility, I'm not for a moment negating the presence that is required in the relationship. Otherwise, don't be in a fucking relationship with someone else.
Right.
Yeah. So those values are not competing. They're living, side by side with each other. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm inaccurate here, what I'm hearing you say is that when there is a strong focus on, I'll do this if you do that, and if you do that, then I'll do this, and that there's a stronger focus on the logistics of life, that, and you mentioned David Data earlier, like he speaks to this sort of 50-50 partnership as well, as being a stepping stone to a deeper level of union, right? And what I'm hearing you say is that 50-50, in essence, if we were to label it that, it's a distraction from deeper intimacy.
I think so.
I would say yes. Yeah, because it is an expression of deeper survival and codependence, right? Not interdependence, not healthy interdependence, but codependence.
What is the difference between the two?
So I'll give you examples. I don't need you, but I choose to be with you. Codependence for me is I need you to be a particular way so that I can feel a particular way. I need you to be happy so I can be happy. I need you to love me so that I can feel safe and feel loved. And it's a need. And if it doesn't happen, I go into emotional turmoil or turbulence. To me, that's tethered to unprocessed trauma, and that's a wound, right? Of not being grounded in self, not experiencing love, not knowing how to love and even receive, right? So there's insecure attachment in that process. Whereas interdependence is we're choosing to be with each other, and you can behave how you want. I'm still going to have boundaries, but I'm going to focus on what I want and what I desire. And I'm going to be really truthful with you. And I'm not going to have an expectation that everything I want and desire in the world can only come from you. And I can still choose. And this is way more advanced as a sovereign being, right? Like I'm going to choose to be happy. And I'm laughing because I'm saying, like, even if you're unhappy, I'm going to choose to be happy. No, it's not that. But if you're not treating me in a particular way, I'm not going to lose my mind about it. I'm going to have a mature conversation with you. And I may feel some feelings, but I'm not going to make those feelings that I'm feeling dependent on how you're showing up to me. What's more important to me is to keep being in my truth, to keep being my desire, to keep being in my communication, to keep holding the relational container, because the relationship is a vehicle for growth, and the relationship holds its own energetic signature. Like in more mature relationships, the relationship is a priority. The container of the relationship is a priority, meaning that it holds its own energetic frequency and signature, and we're not just there for self or for the other, or even for each other. We're actually there for what the relationship, us two coming together, represents. And these are the higher order values and principles that even David Data and other amazing practitioners will speak to. That now, I'm going to ask the question, am I a better person being in this relationship? Is my wife a better person for being in the relationship? Am I a better person because of her in the relationship? Is she a better person because of me in the relationship? Does the nature of our relationship positively and healthily impact all those around us in our immediate and maybe in the concentric circles that exist beyond us, right? Whereas a 50-50 partnership isn't asking that at all. And then, the layers below that is like, I'm only here to get what I want and I don't actually care. Because a 50-50 is like, oh, I'll give you that for sure. What do you need? Oh, I'll give you that if you give it to me, or I'll give it to you if you give it, whatever. But the layers before that is like, I'm only here to take. I'm only here to take. I'm only here to take. And so we begin to transcend selfishness, but as we're transcending selfishness, and we're not moving into pure selflessness, by the way, that's not really part of it, but we're transcending like deep-rooted selfishness and self-absorption. We're actually untethering from trauma, and we're not being, I mentioned come from earlier, the come from isn't from a wound or a compensation. The come from is from a more empowered, embodied place, like a healthier place within us. Like we're more actively, consciously choosing. We're not being run by unconscious programs that were established during our developmental years that form protection, layers of protection, defenses and masks so that we can feel safe, where we apply excessive control in the world. That begins to fade away in higher order relationships.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think part of it is something that you've touched on a couple of times, which is that sense of self-worth, because then you are going to have that boundary and you're not going to let someone like so easily access. Exactly. you're in the throes of young fatherhood.
Yeah.
I think a lot of more conscious parenting, it's like, how do I not fuck up this kid? Like I lose sleep over that all of the time, and no matter what, I'm not going to be perfect. I have accepted that I'm going to make a ton of mistakes, but I want to not leave you with any big T traumas. I would love to leave you with no little T traumas as best as I can. And how are you approaching fatherhood to instill self-worth, especially with like a little girl? And I've got 2 little boys. Like, I want them to feel like strong and capable young men.
The question I ask myself, having my daughter, she's a little over 3 years old, has been one of the most self-reflective, embodied times of my life. And I really lean into my wife a lot as well. She's really intuitive with our daughter, and she's a woman, my daughter's a girl, and my wife really knows our daughter very well. They're so connected. I mean, she was living in her for 9 months, or thereabouts, and their nervous systems still feel at some level that they're one, and so she knows her really well. I'm not saying I don't know my daughter, sure, but there's ways that she knows it I just don't, right? So I lean into that as part of it. But the question I ask myself, and what the question I've come with, men particularly speak a lot about legacy, the word legacy. I mean, I guess if there was a study done, the word legacy would be, a large percentage of men would say that word far more often than women, is my guess, right? So I think legacy is a little bit of a fallacy, and it's also rooted in fear, but put that aside for a second. If we look at legacy in the now, not the later, right? And to say something to that, I think the focus on legacy, like what do we leave behind, can also help direct us in how we act now, and that's what I want to follow. That's the thread I want to pull, and the sort of the legacy that I would like to leave. But really, instead of living, the legacy I want to live, moment to moment, is how deliberately, consciously, positively, etc., can I imprint upon my daughter's nervous system on a moment to moment basis. And what that question evokes in me, and what it does for me, is it allows me to look at myself and my behavior and my thoughts and everything. I'm not pedantic about it. I'm more just checking in with myself, right? Am I angry right now? Am I present right now? Am I scattered? Am I stressed? Am I worried? Do I want to imprint that upon her now through, the process of neuroception, where our nervous systems are interacting with each other unconsciously you and I are doing that right now with each other's presence, right? And so I have way more awareness around that. So if I need to shift my state, because it's in the micro moments, and then from there, like if I do behave in a way that maybe is impactful to her, that is negative or intense or whatever, however I interpret that, how quickly can I genuinely repair with her? And that could look like, baby, I'm so sorry. Daddy was really loud then. I'm going to do my best to not do that again. Is there anything you need right now? As an example, right? Or I may need to change and shift my demeanor. Because again, there's a comfort and a desire that comes with being slow. Like if I'm here, if you and I are talking over each other and we're being really fast with each other and erratic, that's not really good for you and I. We're going to feel that, right? Now we're moving into protection and all these other psychological mechanisms that are playing out. But also someone else watching that is going to be like, oh, that's jarring, right? There's a reason why it's jarring. And so slowing down brings us into a parasympathetic state. It's more open and conscientious. We're more creative from that place. It's more attractive, if you like, right? Again, I'm thinking something. Yes, it's more attractive, but sometimes when we're trauma bonded and we're addicted to our trauma, anger and speed is more attractive, which is most of the world, right? But what's genuinely, truly more attractive is slowing down. And so I'm just checking in with myself a lot. I mean, I'm consistently, constantly giving attention to how can I just be a better dad, and what values, like first principle values, do I hold as a father? And one of them is self-accountability and ownership for my actions. Like when my daughter was first born, up to probably the first 1.5-2 years of her life, my experience was, no daddy, like it was really pushing me away, and it was all mum.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there's something developmental to that, but I went deeper than that. And the reality was that I was super insecure as a father. I was being super codependent, meaning that I wanted her to want me so I could feel good. Mm. And it was all little boy stuff. It was all my childhood stuff that was coming up, being a new father. And until I took real responsibility of that and actually worked through that, worked with others on that, made it real, in other words, not made it real, noticed that it was really real, as opposed to try and push it away with, doing more work and being productive and being, valued and validated through those means, and really worked on not being codependent with her. That's when our relationship started to change. That's where we started to bond deeper. Now we're far more intimate with each other. There's a way deeper relationship now that wasn't there before, and it wasn't her. Mm-hmm. It was me. And again, we spoke about this earlier before we started the pod about there is so much unknown in life. There's so many nuances we can't control, nor should we try it. But if we can just go deeper within our own selves and say, well, what can I change? I think there's great embodiment and empowerment in that.
If you could go back, like what would be a useful tool to someone who's about to be a father or about to be a mother, to kind of take note on, work on, be conscious of before this little comes into the world? Because your experience sounds very similar to mine with my first, not with me, but with my ex. And you don't realize necessarily what might still be lingering as far as like a wound from your childhood. And then littles have a way of bringing that to the surface in very real ways.
Because I got angry, man. I got angry at my wife. I was like, oh, it's your fault. It's the way you're being with her. That's why she's pushing me away. I got angry. But that's my coping strategy. Like, anger for me is the way I protect and defend and see and grasp control, right? Mm-hmm. Look, it's a difficult question to answer, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I've done a stack of personal development work, and I genuinely have, and there's genuinely a stack more to go, right? And so I can sit here and say, hey, work with your childhood, work with the stuff that you've experienced that you've been numbing and running from, and create a baseline at least, right? And what does a baseline look like? It's pretty subjective for everyone, but you understand your core wounds and do work around that. Like, work to equilibrate them so they don't charge you emotionally. They don't activate you so you then get reactive and protective or angry or shut down or whatever. You don't go into those coping strategies that are maladaptive as an adult. Like, it worked for you to go hide under your bed when your parents were fighting and just hide and not breathe, right? That worked as a kid. It helped you survive. Mm-hmm. But that shit's not going to work as an adult. You shutting down the world and shutting down what's uncomfortable and running away from it's not going to work. You're not going to address it. You're not going to overcome it or move through it, right? Mm-hmm. So I invite everyone to really be deliberate about looking at their life and looking at the patterns in their lives and saying, what's not working or what's really uncomfortable? Let me go deeper into that and let me seek some support. But man, the rest is sort of, as I say, sort of up to God. Like, stuff's going to come up. Mm-hmm. It's just life. You, no matter how advanced or progressed or how much inner work you've done, it's a novel, powerful experience being a parent, and it's going to bring stuff up. Mm-hmm. End of story. The more equipped you are, the more you know yourself, and the more tools you have and support systems in your life that you have. So self-awareness, tools, support, like exposure to tools that you've used before, psychological, psycho-emotional, relational tools, and support system in your life that you have, you will mitigate the negative impact of whatever arises as a result of the new experience that is, you're not sleeping, your child has gas, you're working less, making less money as an entrepreneur, as an example, if you don't have all your systems set up or whatever. Like, I experienced all of this stuff, But again, I had support. I did have tools. I'd done a tremendous amount of inner work. It could have been a lot worse. Like, basically, my wife and I would have been divorced right now. And I would have still been in the pity party of my daughter doesn't want me and doesn't love me and what's going on and I don't understand. And Because that's another way to distract ourselves. Oh, I don't understand, or I want to understand. That's distraction. Like there's value in knowing and understanding because it does give us a pathway through. But when we get fixated on not understanding or needing to understand, it's a distraction from feeling, which is a distraction from being present, which is a distraction from being in our truth, which is avoidance of what is really there. Not healthy.
So presence, I think, it's one of my favorite words, especially when it comes to the dynamic between like masculine, feminine, parenting. It's one of the most important things that you can do. While I think that dismissing everything and not examining anything and not trying to develop is obviously avoidance, it's opposite of presence, I think that can happen on this like personal development and healing train as well, where you like catastrophize everything, or like everything is deep and everything is shadow work. Like instead of being present in the moment and just celebrating, right? Like that's an important part of life, is this is good and I'm going to be here and I'm going to enjoy this moment, instead of saying this is like a really deep wound. I guess the question is, when do you know to kind of like hang up the phone or step off the treadmill and be present instead of like constantly trying to like be 1%, 1% better? Do you like let the sleeping dogs lie?
Stop going to ayahuasca every fucking weekend.
Yes, it drives me bananas. Like these psychonauts that are, it's like every other week or every other month. I'm like, at some point you need to integrate and be.
That integration, right? So the thing that we miss is because we chase dopamine and we chase the peak experience, is that we miss that healing and wholeness and doing, quote unquote, doing the work. An integral part of that is integration in space. And again, sometimes you may actually need to go do the plant medicine journey every weekend for 6 months, and then you may need 3 years off, right? Like everyone's different, so there's no judgment around that per se, but there is a reality that exists when you are in the work, right? When you are wanting to evolve and improve, part of that evolution, part of that improvement process is literally taking space away from chasing that thing that you want to get better at, right? Whether it's an internal thing or an external thing. I mean, didn't Isaac Newton sit under the tree because he was trying to figure out a problem, and then the apple fell in his head? Like he created space from the problem solving, right? The apple fell in his head, and he goes, gravity, got it. Okay, whatever. I'm obviously bastardizing that, but you get what I'm saying, right? Again, Einstein would go on walks. So you need space away from the intensity, and that's the harmony, right? Otherwise, if there's too much, expansion doesn't exist without contraction. Contraction doesn't exist without expansion, right? Like we live in this world of duality, and so if we're going to pursue betterment, that's great. But it can come at a cost if we're too relentless. And again, there are periods of times where we need to be relentless and we need more go and we need more, I know a lot of people and so much of the world, especially the generation that, the time that we're living in now, I should say, where everything is done for us, everything is automated, like even AI, right? And I love AI, but there's so much automation to it. So there's so much diffusion of responsibility, or there's diffusion of taking more action or thinking through things more thoughtfully, right? Everything is automated. And there's a laziness that comes with that, and lack of inspiration and motivation. So I'm not saying don't take action, absolutely, but also part of taking action is having space away and knowing when to. Well, how do you know? Well, the more trauma you clear, the more clutter you clear from your psychological, emotional, relational system, the more self-aware you become, the more self-worth you feel, and the more acutely and accurately you can make decisions about, hey, I need some space away from this thing right now, and it's okay to have that. I'm just going to go have some fucking fun. I'm going to go surf. I'm going to go travel. I'm not going to go necessarily go deep into my shadow. It's not going to help right now. And I know that. So I'm going to, and if I don't know that, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to check in with my network and my support system and give me some feedback and say, hey, guys, I've been working on this thing for a while. I think I need some space. Am I just making excuses and I'm really close, or do you also agree with that? Get someone that can see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think we talked about trauma bonding a couple of times. I think that's one of the interesting things that becomes aware, like especially if a couple starts doing the work. It's, you could have been in what you thought was a great relationship, just like the example I gave earlier where the girl's like, it's fine, it's just a whack. You start doing the work and then you realize, everything we have in common. It's like all of our damage kind of lines up perfectly. And as you start to work on yourself, like that no longer is clicking, and then you have more increase in self-worth, so then you don't tolerate certain things. And I think that's what happens with a lot of divorces, especially later on. Some people say it's women becoming postmenopausal and it's hormonal, and they try to dismiss that. And I think the other option, and one that seems pretty viable to me, it's like you as a woman begin to know who you are later on in life, and you start to develop that sense of self-worth. So like you don't tolerate behaviors that you maybe did before, or again, like the trauma bond starts to kind of loosen. You're like, oh, this isn't the relationship I thought it was this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with what you're saying. Unless both people in that relationship are open to the value of growth, like they prioritize growth. Like in my relationship with my wife, like one of our strongest, probably our biggest value actually is growth. Like we both really value growth, and there's a lot of that layers and I guess truth that sits underneath that, or that extends from that, if you like. But if one person is really wanting to grow and is growing, and the other person's not, the person that's growing is going to see the relationship themselves, that person, through a new filter and new filters and new lenses, and they're not going to be stuck in the past. And unless they're growing together, they can grow differently. That's okay as well, by the way. I mean, too differently, then obviously their paths are diverging, right?
Is part of that what you would categorize more as like God or fate, or like something that's completely out of your control? Like how do you that is one of the tricky things too, because I feel like one of the more dangerous spots for a couple are the ones that are high achievers and trying to change and examining things very closely, because it's like ignorance is a bliss. Like if you have two people that aren't working on themselves and they're totally okay with the status quo, those couples will be together for 80 years sometimes.
Maybe, I just don't know if they're, and again, every case is different, so to speak. I just don't know if they're genuinely okay with themselves, or they're tolerating, or they're just so addicted and or accustomed to the discomfort and the trauma that it's just normal for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but like if we're using time as a metric, which I think a lot of people do to say successful or not, it's like, well, they're still together. Well, like that's not what I want.
No, I mean, my parents are still together, and they have a toxic relationship, and they're still together. They have a very unhealthy dynamic where, example, like they barely talk to each other. They live in the same space. They barely talk to each other. When they do, they're screaming at each other, or being emotionally abusive to each other, treating each other with disdain and disgust. Like you can sense it, feel it, see it in their tone. I mean, I wouldn't say that's a successful relationship per se. I mean, they're successful at staying trauma bonded. I mean, there's success in that, right? Like it depends how you look at success, right?
Absolutely.
But I guess back to your question around, reframe the question for me.
I guess, is there a way to intentionally grow together, or do you think that sometimes, and maybe it is because it was a trauma bond, that through growth, it might be inevitable that the relationship ends?
Yeah, I guess the first principles question you're asking me is like, what's the balance between determinism and autonomy or choice in that way, right? That's sort of what I'm hearing. I sort of sit in the middle, where I think it's a combination of both, where there's free will in how we behave and show up, and there's levels of determinism. There's neurological determinism, there's like biophysical determinism, environmental determinism, spiritual determinism, whether it be God or something that is predefined, and maybe it's just based on the way life cycles occur. I do believe that two partners have the capacity and potential, but not always, to grow together. And I guess that's part of the determinism piece. Like some people will just never grow out of their trauma, or some people will just never be able to see the light, or some people will never be able to just stop being angry that feeds into the trauma bond, or whatever it is, right? Or some people just don't want to change, and they never will because they don't want to, and maybe they're not meant to. I try and get, it's not about a belief system. I try and get away from, and it's not because I'm hyper material, right? But I try and get away from or not focus on all the layers of reality that exist. Like, for example, I experienced this in a past life, that's why I'm like this now. Like, I don't disagree with that. I'm not judging that. I think there's actually some truth to that. But if we get stuck on all of that, it pulls us away from now. And to me, it's not only a distraction but disempowerment as well. It's like, oh, well, that happened. That explains why I'm like this. Oh, well, there you go. Like, you got more chance of changing something now in this way, in this physical reality, as opposed to something that happened 748 lifetimes ago. And again, I'm not mocking that. I work with spiritual healers that go into those realms, and I there's a part of me that really believes that. But if we become hyper focused on that, we miss out on the opportunity of changing now. Look, how's that old saying go? Reason, season, lifetime. You know, people come into your life for a reason. Some people come into your life for a season, and some people come into your life for a lifetime. And not everyone's meant to be in all three, right? Not everyone's meant to be the lifetime. That's just the way it is, right? You know, not our partners, as an example, are not meant to actually be everything for us. You may find exceptions in the world where there is partnership where they are everything for each other. That's pretty rare, though. Pretty rare. Like, very rare, I would say. And so just like we're not meant to be everything for each other, we're not meant to be all together for a lifetime either. And so trying to fight that is, again, the more you know yourself, the more support you have, the more clutter you clear from your internal self, the more you can truthfully arrive, or more honestly or more accurately arrive at that decision of, you know, simplifying reason, season, lifetime. Is this person a reason, season, or lifetime?
No, I love that reminder. Because there is a lot of pressure, and I love the example that you gave with your parents, because it's no matter what, it is a failure, and especially if kids are involved, you're ruining your kids if you leave the other person. And to me, because I'm recently going through that, and you get a lot of judgment, especially when you put yourself out there online, and I refuse to believe that dynamic is better. Even if I end up like by myself, like let's say I never find another romantic partner, I would still say that is more of a healthy example to give my kids than a relationship that is like two
Choosing
people where
yeah. Was that your truth, to leave the relationship and not be part of that relationship anymore? Well, then if that's really your truth, then that is the greatest example you can give, your truth.
So I guess with
and it's hard to do, right?
Because it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Family, people, public sphere, whatever, it's saying, oh, you should just try and make it work, or go to God, or do this or do that. And sure, but maybe that's not their healthiest choice. Maybe it really isn't. Staying together isn't. And some people it is. It's important they stay together and they move through that and they work through that. For some people it's not. And that's just, there's not a one size fit all.
And then how would you help someone who's trying to figure that out? So for me, it was years before I could like commit, right? And I can go back and I'm like, I can see where the questioning started, and like that place, like that gray area lasted so long, because it's terrifying. And like, how do I know I'm making the right choice? For me, it ended up being, the writing was just on the wall. Like, it was so obvious. I would get like just intuition, feelings. My nervous system was just never at ease. It became glaringly obvious, but I wouldn't be able to tell someone like, this is how you know. I don't know if you have any tips or ways to check in to find that.
I think this might be helpful. So imagine, can I ask you some questions?
Please, absolutely.
About your personal life?
Yeah, open book.
So, great. I appreciate that. So it's always so refreshing. And likewise. So how many years ago did you start being with this person?
15 years.
15 years ago. Okay. 15 years ago. And then how many years into that, and when did you break up?
Separated in March, like legally separated.
Yeah, okay.
But like actively trying to like salvage a relationship about 2 years.
So when did you, okay. So you were both actively attempting to salvage a relationship, or trying to create a new relationship, essentially, right? Like a healthier relationship. Okay.
Correct.
When did you realize, so 15 years ago, when did you realize, like when you look back now earnestly, when did you realize that something, not that the relationship's not for you, or maybe that's the case, but or something that was wrong, but you just needed change in the relationship? Like you needed significant change. When did you realize that? 3 years in, a year in, 5 years in?
Immediately.
How many?
Like literally
Like 6 months?
Sooner, probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
it
wow.
was, so I was just leaving another long-term relationship, and he was supposed to be casual, and that was okay for probably a couple months, but then I ended up wanting to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of like cheating in the beginning. I mean, I was,
From him?
from him in the
So
beginning.
you knew this, you were aware of that back
And
then?
I still stayed,
You still stayed, okay.
Yeah.
So you're a few months in and you realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in those moments, if you can think back, it was a long time ago, but do you believe that you were really in your truth with what you needed, and were you really boundaried in the ways that you needed to be back then?
I was definitely not boundaried. I fell into the narrative of I don't care if he's with other women because I'm not looking for anything serious. Like I'm easy breezy. Yeah. Well, he'll commit.
But it was
when
uncomfortable
he's ready.
for you. It didn't feel right for you.
Yeah. I was trying to be like the cool girl.
Yeah. Now, can you imagine, right, if you knew yourself, and hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Right,
If you knew yourself then like you know yourself now, and you also had the self-worth then that you have now, my sense is I feel that your worthiness of self is far greater and expanded than what it was, right? And can you imagine you had the voice then that you have now, right? How much different would your life be? And don't overthink it. You say like it would probably be different, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But more importantly, what if you did that, right? And again, this is an infinite game because there's literally infinite possibilities of where this could go. What if you did that and you were so because, you know, feminine superpower is discernment. You were so discerning in your truth, right? So grounded in your truth that then he's like, whoa. And let's just say he couldn't hold it. So then you guys split up. So then, you know, wherever your life goes, it goes. Who knows? Whatever. Obviously, it's not meant to go that way because it didn't.
Right.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
But also, there's a reason why I'm saying this, not to say, oh, what if this and what if that, and you know, should have, could have, would have. It's not that. It's an exercise in connecting to our power and our truth, right? Imagine one of the possibilities is, wow, he says, damn, I can see all that. I'm really sorry, or hey, you're saying all you want is casual. And imagine you getting in this deep conversation. All of a sudden, you both change, and for the better, right? And you both, and then now you're growing together. Here's the point I'm illustrating. The more, again, I'm going to come back to truth, right? The more honesty and truth that we can be in, that gives us vitality. Like, hey, that's not working for me. I'm telling you I want to be easy breezy, but I'm actually just saying that because there's a part of me that wants to be really liked. And I want you to like me, and I want to be okay with him, but I'm fucking not okay. And like, imagine you got to that level of truth, and then truth builds on truth. Maybe it doesn't because he can't hold that. So see you later though. But imagine all these people in the world, all the women like you that feel something but don't act on it, either never act on it or don't act on it for months or years, decades. Can't tell you how many women I've worked with where it's, oh, I'm getting a divorce now, and you know, we've been together 30 years, and reality is I didn't want to be here 5 years in or 3 years in, but I made it work for the kids, or I just tried it, or whatever the reasons are. They're not necessarily excuses. They're genuine reasons, right? Can you imagine if everyone was able to touch that truth? How would the world, again, it's a rhetorical question, right? How would the world unpack itself? Because right now, the way I see it is we've just got a stack of wounded people that are in their shit and in their masks and in their lies, walking around interacting with each other. All of us at some level. Some just more intense, and most of us way more intense than others.
No, that's actually, when you said that, I just felt so much comfort kind of wash over me. It's looking back, the scariest thing is uncertainty. And of course you're going to have that if you're acting out of a place that's not in alignment, right? If you're compromising on yourself or your principles or your values in order to have that relationship. But if you were operating in a place of truth and like, this is my boundary, this is what I'm okay with, this is not what I'm okay with, this is what I want, and a part of that is like exposing your belly and being vulnerable, then you're actually getting rid of a lot of the uncertainty because you know that you're operating from a place of alignment.
Because of the truth.
Right.
The energy that the truth carries. Like,
Yeah.
I love certainty.
Yeah.
And I would prefer, like in those moments, you probably look back and say, well, I would prefer certainty over being alone. Or I would prefer certainty over not being liked.
Mm-hmm.
And you let that settle in your body. And it begins to diffuse and it begins to change. And we start to see and feel the world very differently from that place. And I'm not saying that, oh, go and change your past, or, oh, imagine you could be with him still. Fuck all to do with that. Don't be with him. That's not the point. No, not at all. But the point of it is that if that level of truth resonates with you now, well, guess what? It's never too late to change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can be that now with your children, with the important people in your life, with your partner, with all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can be that now, and that's the whole point of growth, is that we're learning from choices that we made that weren't in the greatest alignment. Mm-hmm. And we can see that, we can identify it, we can deal with the guilt and shame that may come from it by facing the guilt and shame, or if it's there, or the fear, or whatever it is, and making changes. That's growth.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're just doing the same thing that you did 15 years ago, you're not growing.
Right.
Or you've grown up, or you look a little different, whatever, but you're not growing.
Mm-hmm.
You're making the same choices.
No, there's this quote, and it's like, if you look back at the person you were X amount of years ago and you don't have a little bit of like, ooh, then you haven't done enough growth. Yeah. You have a lot of that. Yeah. So I'm like, at least that's some kind of metric I can use to know that I'm moving somewhere in the right direction. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh. But I think you came into my life at the perfect time, and that this conversation was kismet. I did miss you at that retreat, but again, I think it was all for a reason. I was there with my ex, and he actually was at it. I don't know if you'd recognize him. I'll have to show you and see if it clicks. Show me later. Yeah, but yeah, he was actually there. I think your wife was with you as well.
Yes, we were doing a sacred union process. Yeah.
So are you still working with couples, individuals?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Plug away, sir.
No worries. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I'll plug is my book. Right. So I feel very, very blessed and very grateful that I have a publishing deal with Hay House, and the book is released February 3rd, 2026. So the book's written, it's all done. We're just in final editing phases now, February 3rd. So it's not available yet, but you can get on the wait list, right? And so it's, I'll give you all the information, but it's stefanosifandos.com/waitlist. You just put your name and your email, and then you'll be on the wait list for when the book is available for pre-orders, right? So super excited about that. And the book goes so much deep into all the things that we spoke about today, and so much more. And there are tangible solutions, pathways, tools, practices that, with couples and separately as an individual, that really help you break free of so much of the stuff that keeps you stuck, right? And it's a book, so it's pretty accessible. If you want to work with me, individuals or couples, coachwithsteph.com.
And I will link all of that below for all of you. This was amazing. I can't wait for this to come out and see all of the feedback. Thank you so much for the time and doing this in person. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Likewise.
Bye, everybody.